welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. My name is Frank Pulley. I'm joined by Mike Davis and also William Bronchick. Bill Bronchick's going to talk to us tonight about pathways to property. He's going to talk about creative financing for real estate investors. So we have a really great presentation for you. But first, I'd just like to say hi. Thanks for joining us. Mike Davis has joined me. So Mike, you got anything to add?
I think this is just great because, Bill, I think this teaching gives people hope who don't have money and maybe, you know what, I can still get involved in real estate. So I think it's just a great thing for people who want to get involved in real estate and have the excuse, well, I just don't have the money. So this is going to be a great teaching. We look forward to it, Bill.
Great. Thanks so much.
Our other fellow coach, Troy Peterson, he lives in Melbourne, Florida. So need I say more?
Exactly.
So he's battening down the hatches. But what we would like to do is, as we get started here, let's go ahead and go to the chat and let us know who you are and where you're from. And then as we get started, if you have questions, you can go ahead and put those in also, and we'll attempt to answer those as within the next hour or so. So let's go ahead and we got a lot of folks. So let's go ahead and all right, Mary from Long Island, Janet from San Diego, Maria from the UK, heck yes. Sue from San Antonio, Mark in Divide, Sue from Pennsylvania. Let's see here. Boy, they're coming up. Anna from Hungary, Jack and Marine, North Carolina, Tad from Minnesota, Jennifer, Colorado Springs, and Mancos, Colorado. Oh, I've been down there near Mesa Verde. Jane, Spokane, Washington, Patty, Salem, Oregon, Iris from Colorado, Robert from Woodland Park, Deb from, visiting her mom at Jack's Beach, Karen from Woodland Park, Fren from Illinois. Let me move down here just a little bit. Let's see here. All right, Deb from Woodland Park, Rudy from Maryland, Maria. Yes, they can be applied at a global context. Ken from British Columbia, and Pat Marsh from Charlottesville, Moses from Campbellsville, myself from Woodland Park. Wow, these guys are cooperating. Brandon from Florida, living in Alabama, Jai from Boston, Bobby from Oregon, Holman from New Mexico, Gigi from Ontario, Canada, Mike from South Africa. All right. Denise from Singapore, all over the world. Look at that. Lagos from Nigeria, Savuth from Minnesota. Wow, you guys are keeping me hopping today. All right. Well, we'll mention the rest of you here in just a little bit, but I want to talk about our presenter tonight. First of all, I've known Bill since 2004 when I became a coaching student of his, and I've done pretty well as a result of his tutelage. And that's one of the reasons I was able to work with WealthBuilders. But Bill's been a real estate attorney for over 30 years. He's also a published author and authored one a few years ago called Flipping Properties that ended up on the bestseller list. He owns dozens of properties, I mean, in many states, and everything from single family homes, multifamily, some apartments, etc. And here's the thing, he's an active investor. He's not one of these guys that just told you what he did, 20 years ago. He really is an active investor. So he's also a good friend of mine. So I want to introduce you to Bill Bronchick. Bill, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies who are behind the scenes making this all happen so smoothly. And of course, everybody from all over the world joining us. It is an honor and a privilege to be sharing information and ideas with you tonight. And it is my not only my hope, but my prayer that you not only get understanding and wisdom from what you learned tonight about creative real estate financing, but that you put it into action right away, because they say real estate is about location. We've all heard that expression before, But real estate is also in today's market more about financing, because that's really the key here is financing real estate right. For a long time, interest rates were very low, money was easy to get, and now things have changed. Interest rates have popped. They've doubled and 2.5 times in many cases, which is making it harder and harder to get cash flow on properties. The qualifications are harder. They're requiring more money down. So, if we look at the financial meltdown back in 2008, we had these no money down loans. Remember those? You didn't have to put any money down and borrow from a bank, and no income verification, meaning you could just state, hey, I make this, and you don't have to prove it. There was a little secret. We called in the business the liar loans because people just lied about what they made. And it was funny. I was doing a seminar once in Vegas around that time, and the cab driver asked me what I was doing in town. I was business or pleasure. I said, well, I'm kind of doing it for business. I'm doing a seminar on real estate investing. He says, yeah, I got 3 properties. And I'm just wondering to myself, how does a cab driver get 3 properties? He says, well, I bought them all, no money down and no income verification. That's how he got it. He didn't put any money down. He bought at the top of the market. More than likely, he's still driving a cab, unfortunately, because he did that. Because not every deal is a good deal just because it's no money down. But I'm going to show you some ways you can buy real estate with little or no money down. But that's not a good way to do it. Now, 2024. There's no money down anymore. You got to put 20% down as an investor as a down payment. You have to go what's called full doc with your lending, which means that you have to provide full documentation to a lender to get a loan, which means tax returns, W-2s, bank statements, no more stated income loans or non-income verification liar loans. Those don't really exist too much anymore in the investment field. So we have to learn new and creative ways to be able to finance properties. So the limits of bank financing are an issue, though. Even if you can put 20% down, even if you've got a great job and can show income and credit and get a loan, it takes too long often to get a loan and close a property. When you've got a motivated seller who says, I need out like next week, they don't have time to wait. Maybe if they're facing a foreclosure, there's no time to wait. Too many hoops to jump through. It's really, Mr. Borrower, what's the color of your underwear? I don't know. White. Why? Boxers or briefs? These extraneous, ridiculous questions in order to get a loan. Eventually, you're going to run out of cash. If you keep plunking 20% down on a property, you're going to run out of cash at some point. You'll also run out of credit because a lot of these lenders have limits on how many loans you can get through their program. So you're going to either run out of money or you're going to run out of the ability to get loans that are available to you. So my solution is to fire your bank and use creative financing. And I've been doing this for a long time. I started out in the early 90s. I didn't have stellar credit, and it was tough to get loans back then, very tough. We were coming out of the 80s and that real estate crash. So banks were very conservative. Interest rates were between 9 and 11% for investors. So I was forced to do the creative thing out of necessity. Now, as times changed and my situation changed and my credit got better and my finances got better, I was able to borrow money from banks, doing it the smart and reasonable way, but I was able to do it for a long time. And then it switched after 2008. They tightened up the regulations again, made it harder. And I haven't been to a bank to borrow money since. I went right back to the way I started, which is really, I like that way of doing it. Using other people's money. It's interesting that some people think that it's a bad idea to use OPM, other people's money. Because it's risky, it's leverage, it's borrowing. And of course, as believers, we're taught, debt is a bad thing. Well, there's a difference between consumer debt and commercial debt or investment debt, which is leverage. You're using money to make money, not using money to buy shoes at the mall or go on a trip and finance it on a credit card. 2 totally different things, of course. So buying a property using other people's money is often a necessity, but here's the thing. Even if you have cash, I suggest you use leverage anyway. And the reason is because if you can't find someone to lend you money on a deal or maybe partner with you on a deal, you should think about dumping that deal. Because if no one's willing to put their money up, why should you put your money up? Does that make sense? So you might be tempted to say, I don't want to go with financing. I'll just pay cash. Sometimes that's dangerous. Sometimes it's a good idea to have someone experienced in the finance world say, we don't like that deal. And if you hear that over and over and over again, and no one wants to be your partner and put up money, the warning bell should be going off there that maybe this isn't a deal worth doing. But my thinking is using creative financing, and we'll start with the very basics of creative financing. And creative financing is going outside the box, so to speak, outside of the normal 20% down, put in an application with a lender, and pay 6, 7, 8% interest as an investor. Those numbers really don't work anymore. It's very difficult to get cash flow on properties in this market. Even if you get a pretty good deal on the property, the interest rates are still pretty high relative to where they were. Historically, they're not that high. As I said, in the early 90s when I started out, I was paying like 9.75 for a 30-year loan. And I still made money. It's just that in today's market, things are a little different because we still have prices relatively high. Some markets have softened up, some neighborhoods have softened up, but not to the point where it would overcome the fact that interest rates are 2 and 3 times what they were 4 years ago. Okay, so there's only so far you can get with a discount on price. Financing is what it's all about. So we'll start with the very basics, and we call seller financing, also known as an owner carry transaction or owner financing, seller financing, seller carry. It's all the same expression. And the model is as follows. You find a seller who owns a property free and clear. What does that mean? No mortgage. And now you might be thinking, well, where am I going to find that? Everyone has a mortgage. No, a third of the properties in the United States are owned without a mortgage, free and clear, no debt. And it's usually older people. And usually it's, if you're looking at properties to buy for income, it's going to be other landlords who have been renting their properties for years and paid off their mortgage by now, and they want to retire and they don't want to play the game, but they still want cash flow. Well, here's a way to make everybody happy. You make an offer for the seller to sell it to you, and the seller takes a small down payment. And what do I mean by small? Well, anything less than 20%, excuse me, is small in today's market. So if you can get away with a deal where a seller is willing to accept, let's say 5% down, 10% down, then you've got a pretty good deal. You don't have to put the full 20% down. And then the seller takes the rest of the purchase price in payments over time for his equity in the form of a promissory note or a note. So you give a small down payment, you give the rest of the purchase price in the form of a note. In addition to that, if you can get some discount on the price, although it's not as important as the terms, don't get too caught up on the price. If you were going to pay cash for the property, whether it's your own cash or borrowing from a lender, then you want to get a pretty substantial discount on the price, 20, 30% off. If the seller's not willing to go that far, that's okay. We can get it at a small discount, maybe 10%. But if they're willing to go with our terms, which is a small down payment, payments over time with interest, but at a lower rate than you would pay to a traditional lender. So maybe 3%, 4%, 5% instead of 6, 7, 8%. Okay. The seller transfers title to you at closing. So the seller will deed over the ownership to you. And then you sign a stack of papers at closing, which include a promissory note and a lien against the property, which we refer to as a mortgage. Now, some states we call that a deed of trust or trust deed, but it's essentially the same thing. It's a lien against the property. So after closing, you own the property. The seller has a note and a lien against the property. So if you don't pay, like any lender, they can foreclose and take the property back. Okay. So the seller is not the owner. The seller is a lien holder against the property. Some of you may be familiar with this in the car loan business, where you have a title registered in your name at DMV and it shows a lien holder. That's the bank you borrowed from. Same thing when you borrow money from a lender for real estate, except there's three parties now. Seller sells to you, the buyer, and the third party lender lends the money and has a lien against the property. In this case, there's only two parties, you and the seller, because the seller is also the lender. Okay. The seller transfers ownership to you and you own the property, but you have a lien against it for what you owe. Now, what are the advantages of doing it this way? Well, many. First of all, there's no bank qualification. If the bank is the seller, it's whatever you and the seller agree to. So in terms of, is this going to be a 30-year loan? Is this going to be a 15-year loan? I've done it as long as 40-year loans. Why? Because it makes the payment lower every month. You can do it with 10% down, 5% down, even done it many times with no money down. In fact, I've even had sellers pay me to buy their house. That's a whole nother topic for another day, but there's no rule, law, or regulation that says you have to put a certain amount down, only if you're borrowing from a lender, an institutional bank, or a mortgage company. But if you're dealing directly with a seller, it's whatever you guys agree to. And that's the beauty of it. So there's no bank qualification. You can do an unlimited number of deals because there's no limit. These are not institutional bank loans, which have rules and regulations about how many and what type of loans they can give you. It doesn't require any credit, and it's not on your credit report, which is a great thing, because if you want to borrow money in the future, whether it be for another property or for a car or for something else, then this loan that you negotiate with the seller is not reported to the credit bureaus. Now, an individual seller who sells a property and takes payments is not reporting that to the credit bureaus. They don't have a way to do that efficiently. Whereas mortgage companies can do that, banks can do that, credit card companies can do that. Individual sellers cannot do that. So, and second of all, you're not going to do the loan in your own name. You would do it in a corporate entity like an LLC or an S corporation. So you could legitimately and legally and ethically say on another loan application for another loan in the future, I don't have any debt here in my real estate. The truth is you don't. Your LLC or your corporation owns the debt. Does that make sense? And also for liability purposes, if your LLC signs for the debt and that LLC only owns that property, what's your loss if things go wrong? If things go south, well, the seller can foreclose and take the property back, but they can't go after you personally because you didn't personally sign anything. Try doing that with an institutional lender. You can't. Most institutional loans, mortgage loans, they make you do the loan in your own name. Now, some will let you do it in an LLC, but they're going to require that you personally guarantee that loan for the LLC. So if it goes bad, they can go after your LLC. They can also go after you personally and your personal assets. So that's one of the beautiful things about doing this type of transaction is you're not personally on the hook. Okay. There's no loan junk costs. Every time a lender says, no cost closing, free, you're paying like $15,000 for that privilege. How? Because they're charging you a slightly higher interest rate. So if they were going to give you the loan for 7%, and then they say, well, no money down, no costs, no closing costs. We pick that all up and they charge you 7 1/8%. And you go, oh, what's the difference? 7 versus 7 1/8? Over 30 years, that's a lot of dough that they're making extra. That's why you're getting no closing costs. You are paying closing costs in essence. You're just paying it a different way. You're paying it over the life of the loan with interest. You can use a corporate entity to buy, as we talked about, as opposed to having to buy personally, which a lot of people, don't like doing that, closing on a property in their own name. And then after closing, they may, transfer ownership to their LLC. But wouldn't it be great if we could just buy straight into an LLC or a corporation or a trust and never have to take title in our own name, which is public record? So these advantages and many, many, many more. So if I haven't convinced you yet, keep listening. Keep listening. So the logistics of a normal sale look like as follows. We have the seller who has title to the property in his name. So if we check the county records, the deed is recorded in the seller's name. He's got a first mortgage against the property, or maybe he's got no mortgage against the property. At closing, he's going to transfer the property to the buyer, and the buyer is going to pay cash, all cash. Now, understand, this buyer doesn't have to come in with his own cash. He could borrow the money from a third-party lender, and that lender would put a new forced mortgage against that title at closing, which will be in the buyer's name after the seller deeds the property over. Understand that a cash sale does not mean the buyer walks in with a briefcase full of money or wires their own funds. If the buyer borrows money from a lender and the lender wires the money in, that's a cash transaction to the seller. A cash sale means the seller received cash, not necessarily that the buyer put up his own money in cash. Does that make sense? As opposed to a seller carry transaction, which we've been talking about. And in that case, the seller is taking some cash at closing and the rest over a period of time under the terms of a note. I hope it's making more sense now. So a cash sale means the seller receives all cash. A seller financed or seller carry or owner carry means that the seller is not receiving all cash. He's receiving some of the equity in the form of payments over time. Whereas the seller finance sale, if you're a visual person, you need to see it visually. We have title to the property in the seller's name, and the seller is going to deed the property over to the buyer, who's going to give some cash and a note, and that note will be secured as a lien against the property in a document we call a mortgage or a trust deed. Okay, so in the first transaction, the mortgage lien came from a third-party lender. In the second transaction, the seller's not receiving all cash, but some cash and payments, and they're the lien holder against the property instead of the lender. Okay? All right. I hope this makes sense. Now, what to offer? A lot of people say, well, what do I offer a seller? Because, I'd like to do it with as little amount as I can down, and I'd like to pay as little interest as I can, and I'd like to make the payments for as long as I can. Those are all good and valid points. I like to offer what I call the 5-5-5. What does that mean? Do you remember Herman Cain? I think he died from COVID. He ran for president. He was the guy who was the president of Blackjack Pizza. And, he had this plan called the 999. Remember that? 9% income tax, 9% sales tax. I don't remember the other 9 was, but it was catchy. So to remember this, I call it the 5-5-5 plan. What does that mean? When you make an offer to a seller who owns a free and clear property, you don't want to put any more than 5% down. That's my initial offer. So 5% doesn't mean I offer 5%. No, I might offer less down. I don't want to go much higher than 5%. Also, I don't want to go any higher than 5% interest, because if I'm going to do that, I might as well beat somebody up on the price who's willing to do so and go to a lender and get a loan, right, at 6 or 7%. So we want to keep the interest rate under 5. Do I offer 5? No. I'm going to offer less than 5, but that's my limit, more or less. and then no less than what's called a 5-year balloon. Now, what does a balloon mean? A balloon means an early payoff. So in the previous transaction where I talked about giving the seller a down payment and then the rest in payments over time, what is the typical amount of time for a loan? That's 30 years, right? Now, it could be 15, it could be 20, could be, but that's what we call the amortization term. So we amortize it over 30 years. Some loans have an early payoff requirement known as a balloon. What is a balloon? A balloon means, let's say the payment is amortized over 30 years, which produces a certain number every month you pay of principal and interest. But whatever is owed at, let's say, year 5 or year 10, the balance has to be paid off at that point. Even though it's amortized over 30 years, it could have an early payoff requirement known as a balloon. Okay. Now, some people say, never do a balloon. Balloons are for clowns. There is some truth to that. However, if you're negotiating with a seller who's 79 years old, his objection is likely going to be, well, I'm not going to be around for 30 years. You have to pay me off, within 10 or 5 years. Well, the truth is, you can continue making payments to his spouse or her spouse, and then after that to the children for the remainder of the 30 years. Topic for another day. But let's say they want an early payoff. Don't do a balloon that's less than 5 years. Meaning, if the seller says, well, I'll sell or carry, but you have to pay me off in 2 years. That's too soon. Too soon. Because when you have a balloon, that means that when the balloon date comes, and let's say that's in 5 years, you have to either sell the property or refinance or find some other way to pay off the seller the balance. Okay. So I don't offer a balloon. I don't mention a balloon, but if the seller says, well, I got to be paid off in, 2 years, I'll say probably something like, well, that's too soon, Mr. Seller. I can do it in 15. No, I can't wait 15, but maybe I can wait 4. Oh no, 4's too long. Maybe I can do 10. But no less than 5 years. So that's the 5-5-5. You want to put about 5% down or less if you can. No more than 5% interest, and no less than a 5-year term. Okay. Now don't confuse term, the balloon date, with amortization. So we're going to amortize the payment over 30, maybe 35 years if you want to get the payment lower. You can do an interest-only payment if you want a lower payment. Doesn't matter. But the balloon has to be no sooner than in 5 years from closing. Okay. Let me give you an example. This is a property found on Craigslist where the seller was advertising owner will finance, seller will carry. And it's a nice little home, and it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, which normally I wouldn't buy. I want to buy at least a 3-bedroom, but it's a good neighborhood. The house was built in 79, which is not that old. Some people say, wow, that's old. No, it's not that old. 1935 is old. Anything 50s and newer is acceptable for me. 79, almost 80, that's a whole nother era. So it wasn't that old. I mean, it wasn't that much work or deferred maintenance. It was a rental property for the seller. And what I liked about it was the cheapest house in the best school district in the state. Okay. That's a good investment, by the way. You want to take a note of that. Buy the cheapest house in the best school district. Why? Because people will stay until their kids are out through high school. They want to stay in the school district. If you buy houses that are nicer or bigger, but in a lousy school district, you're going to have more turnover. Okay. So that's what I really liked about this property. So we talked about it. The after repaired value, or ARV, was 130. Now, it really didn't need any repairs. It was fine to go as is as a rental. It wasn't in tip-top shape. I mean, it didn't have stainless steel appliances and granite countertops or anything like that, but it was in fine rental condition. Fine rental condition. So we agreed on the property's worth about 130. We agreed on a 111. Now, that's not much of a discount, you may notice. 130 down to 111, that's not a huge steep discount. That's only $19,000. But he was willing to play by my terms, which was 5% down payment and payments at 6% interest. Now I said 5, but he was willing to go the full term, the full 30 years, no balloon. Now the seller was no dummy. He was a retiring landlord who realized, I don't want to play this game anymore. I'm getting older. I want income for my family and for me in retirement. And then when that's done, when I'm gone and my wife is gone, I want income to my kids and my grandkids. He realized he had bought this house in 1981, which would have been a monster tax hit because he probably paid 20 grand for it back then, right? Monster capital gain. When you sell a property, and this is very important for you to understand as a buyer, when you sell a property and you do a seller carry, you pay tax on the down payment you receive, that 5% down, but you don't pay capital gains tax on the rest, the other 95%, until you receive it. So this seller was savvy enough to understand that he wouldn't pay capital gains on the difference between 20 and 111. And right up front, he'd pay it over the 30 years that he received the payments on the loan. So that's a great selling benefit that you want to present to a seller, especially if they've owned the property a very long time and might have a big tax liability if they sold it for cash. Makes sense? So we get to talking. And by the way, I negotiated, I said, can we do a 40-year note? And he laughed and said, well, I'm not going to be around in 30 or 40 years, but that's fine. Why did I want to do a 40-year term? Because the longer the amortization period, the lower the monthly payment. I'm only putting 5% down, which means my loan is 95% loan to value, which means my rent versus my mortgage payment, it was just over break even. It was not much cash flow. So what I did was I said, if I have a 40-year payment, my payment dropped quite a bit. And then I was able to have more cash flow a month. Okay. So we get to talking, and, he's a nice old style landlord. He did all the repairs himself. He fixed toilets and screen doors, and his wife collected rents and kept all the records. Nice couple. And we get to talking, and he says, yeah, these properties have done real well for my wife and I. I go, wait a minute. Did you back up? Beep, 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 beep. Did you say properties with an S? He says, yeah. I said, what else do you have? He says, I have 6 other properties in the same neighborhood just like it. I said, what have you been holding out for? Monty, let's make a deal. So we made a deal on all 7 properties. And you can see from the pictures, it's all basically the same thing. They're just different colors, and sometimes the garage is on the left side, sometimes the garage is on the right side, but it's the same neighborhood, built about the same time, same builder, same developer, everything. So the purchase price for all 7 was $777,111 each. Down payment of 5%, which was only $38,850, and then the balance at 6% interest. Again, 5% was what I was shooting for, but with a package deal, with no credit of my own, without having to qualify with a bank, no junk fees, no loan application, no personal guarantee. This was a good deal. This was a very good deal. And the best part about it is my IRA bought the whole package tax-free. That's right. I have a Roth IRA that I converted in 2010 that bought these properties, and the Roth IRA put up the $38,850. And now those properties are worth, last I checked, low 4s each one, low 400s. So about 2.6, 2.7, 2.8 million, give or take, the whole package is. And I only paid $777, and I only put $38,000 down. And it's all tax-free, because if I sell those properties after I pay them off, it's all tax-free. It's a Roth IRA. So if you're not using your IRA for investing, you want to learn how to do that. And that's one of the things we're going to be teaching at the upcoming workshop the real estate workshop, which we'll tell you about at the end of the webinar. Okay. Strategy number 2, the lease with option. Lease with option. So what is a lease with option? It is a lease agreement with an option to purchase equals a lease option agreement. Most of us know what a lease agreement is. It's a rental agreement to rent a property. An option to purchase is the buyer's right, but not the buyer's obligation to buy. Meaning, in a regular contract, seller promises to sell, and buyer promises to buy, and both parties are bound. In an option agreement, the seller is bound, but the buyer is not. The buyer has the option to complete the transaction and the option not to. The option to just say no, walk away. Now, why is this good? This is good for you as the person holding the option, because let's say you leased a property with an option to buy it, and after several years, it went down in value. Why should you complete the sale? You're not obligated to. Whereas if you just buy it right out, you're stuck on that mortgage you signed personally for the next 30 years. Okay? So follow me how this works. This is what's known as a sandwich lease option. Sandwich. You find a motivated seller. You lease the property from them with an option to purchase. That's what's called a master lease, meaning you're not going to live in it. You have the right to sublet, which is very common in commercial, not that common in residential, but there's no rule that says we can't use it. So you lease it from the owner with an option to purchase at a below market price. Doesn't have to be a steal. It could be just like I talked about in the previous example, 111 on a property worth 130 is fine. Or if you want to use bigger numbers, 400 on a property worth 450. Well, that's not a super bargain. That's like 10% off. Okay. And you can rent it from them to cover their mortgage payment if they have one. And that rent must be less than market rent. So we're going to sublet the property to a subtenant. They're going to pay market rent to us, and we're going to pay the lease payment to the owner to cover their mortgage every month. And we're going to make a spread on the difference. If we have an option to buy it 10% below market, we're going to give our subtenant an option to buy it from us. Now, how do you sell something you haven't yet bought? People ask that question all the time. You didn't. You're agreeing to sell a property, which you have the right to buy first. So when your subtenant is ready to buy, you go to the owner and say, I'd like to complete the sale. And then you turn around and sell it to the subtenant at a marked up price. So there's another profit center. Now, when you're dealing with the owner, it's like a lease, first and security. When you're dealing with the subtenant is Mr. Future homebuyer. How much money are you willing or do you have to put down for your future home? So we're going to get earnest money, not just first and security. We're going to get 3 to 4 months worth of non-refundable money. Now, if they buy, they get that money credited off the price. If they don't, you get to keep it either way. It's non-refundable, okay? So the profit centers here, if you caught them, are the monthly cash flow, rent in, rent out. Number 2, non-refundable earnest money. So if I put up, let's say the rent is $2,000 a month, and I put up first and security with the owner, that's $4,000. With the subtenant, I get first month's rent, $2,000, plus another $8,000 in earnest money, non-refundable. I got 10. 10 in, 4 out. Does that make sense? And number 3 is the back end. The difference between what I have the right to buy it for and what I'm going to sell it to my subtenant for. Now, this strategy is going to work very well in an increasing market or a flat market because you're buying below and selling it at or a little above market. You're marking it up a little bit. In a falling market, this won't work very well because the buyer will never complete the transaction, so you won't get number 3. Okay, so if your market or neighborhood you're dealing in is flat or increasing, it works extremely well. If it's going down in value, especially substantially, probably not a strategy that's going to work very well in that time period, in that neighborhood. And remember, every neighborhood is different. Every town is different and every situation is different. It's just another tool in the arsenal. Okay. Finally, number 3, OPM, OPE, OPC, and OPR. What do those mean? Well, OPM, using other people's money. Now, let's say in the scenario where the 38,000 deal on the 7 houses, let's say you didn't have 38 grand. Hey, raise your hand in the chat. I mean, don't click the raise the hand, put it in the chat. If you say, just say, yeah, me. Would anybody who would have liked to be my partner on that deal put up 38 grand to get half the equity that I talked about? Just say, yeah, I would. Don't click the raise hand feature. That's something different on Zoom. I don't know how to work that one. Of course you would. And I'm seeing people saying, yeah, I would. So that would be a nothing down deal for me, right? OPE, other people's experience. Let's say I found that deal, I had the 38, but I had no idea how to structure that. Well, you can come to someone like me and I'll show you how to do it. And then, or we're a partner and I'll show you how to do it. OPC, other people's credit. Now, I said, you don't have to qualify for a loan, but if you wanted a situation where you needed to get a bank loan and you couldn't qualify personally, could you use somebody else's credit, meaning get a partner who can qualify for that loan? Let's say it was an apartment building or a commercial project where you just you didn't have the wherewithal or financial backing to borrow $5 million, but you knew someone who could. You find the deal, they put up their credit to get the loan, and then you split. OPC. OPR, other people's resources. And let's say you wanted to do a property that was a fixer-upper, okay? And you found a good deal, but you have no idea how to do a rehab project. Could you partner with someone who was a contractor, who had a whole crew that could do the fix-up and knew how to do it? Of course. So don't be held back and don't use excuses like, I don't have money, OPM. I don't know what I'm doing, OPE. I don't have the ability to get a loan, OPC, or one of the other strategies I talked about. I don't have the resources, OPR. You can always leverage other people's things, whether it be money, credit, experience, resources, you name it. You name it. Okay. And OPA, other people's advice. A little bonus there. 5th one. OPA. And advice is as important, from keeping out of trouble as it is getting through a deal, as an advisor, as a consultant, as an attorney, as a mentor and a coach, and as a speaker at a lot of these events. My job is more often to keep you away from bad deals as it is to help you through a good deal. Okay. So they say you can't get rich quick in real estate, but you can get broke pretty quick if you don't know what you're doing. So listen to other people's advice as well. And speaking of that, let me give you a couple of profit pointers. And then I'm going to tell you about the upcoming workshop this weekend in Denver. Profit pointer number 1, getting out of your comfort zone, right? Got to be willing to do something different if what you're doing is not working. You know the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So be willing to step out and do something different. Here's an example. This is a 14-year-old girl in Florida who bought a home for $12,000. She had 6. How did she get 6? Well, she was antiquing and finding things at garage sales and estate sales and selling them on Craigslist. Okay. She had saved up $6,000. Very entrepreneurial, hardworking young lady. Her mom was a real estate agent. And her mom had a listing on a $12,000 home in Florida. This was in like 2009 at the bottom. And the daughter said, Mom, I want to buy that property. She says, really? With what? She goes, well, I have 6. And the mother goes, where are you getting the other 6? She goes, you're going to lend it to me, Mom? Oh, I am I? And how are you going to pay me back? Well, I'll give you half the rent until it's paid off. And she said, well, who's going to fix the property up? My friends and I will. She had a pizza party. She and her friends painted it, fixed it up, cleaned it up, rented it out. How about that? Now, when you hear stories about 14-year-olds doing deals, you got to look at yourself in the mirror sometimes and say, my goodness, What is my excuse? So whether you're 14 or you're 74, it really doesn't matter, because if you want to get somewhere, you'll be somewhere a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. The question is, where? And if you say, I'm too old, well, next year you'll be 75. So what? At least you want to be in a better place than you are when you're 74. All right. Profit pointer number 2, be decisive when you see opportunity. They say in real estate, you can't steal houses in slow motion. You got to move when the deal is right. And here's the thing about decisiveness. You don't always know 100% if something is right. There's always a risk, isn't there? The idea is to get educated, to get trained, to make a calculated risk, an informed risk, an educated risk, not a blind risk. But the more you learn, the more you will earn, because you're going to reduce the risk and the variables. But at some point, you have to just go with your gut or the Holy Spirit talking inside you saying, do that deal. Trust me. That voice is the voice you should be listening to, not the voice of fear, not the voice of worry, not the voice of, oh my goodness, what happens if? That voice has never been your friend, and you shouldn't be listening to that voice. Listen to the voice that says, trust me, trust me. Profit pointer number 3, invest in yourself. You are the best investment that you can make. There is no better investment in your skills and your education and your knowledge, and that's something no one can take from you. So on that realm, there is formal education, which many of us have. That's the problem with formal education, right? Is that we have degrees and master's degrees, and we use spreadsheets and Excel, and we overanalyze everything, and we suffer from analysis paralysis, and we don't do deals. Right? Well, someone else who's dumber than you says, I like that deal, I'll do it. Doesn't that really tick you off when someone's dumber than you, makes more money than you? You know, you see this guy with a hot dog stand. I buy hot dog for $1. I sell hot dog for $3. I make $2. I have 47 hot dog stands. It kills you, doesn't it? Someone who's dumb as that, dumb as a bag of rocks making money, doesn't overthink it. Right? That's the problem with formal education. We have too much of it. And then there's specialized knowledge, which Napoleon Hill wrote about in his book called Think and Grow Rich in 1938. There are 2 kinds of knowledge. One is general, the other specialized. General knowledge, and no matter how great in quantity or variety as it may be, is of little use in the accumulation of money. The person who stops studying merely because he has finished schools forever hopelessly doomed to mediocrity. The way of success is the way of continuous pursuit of knowledge. And that couldn't be any more true almost 100 years later, right? So action changes things. It's time to take action. And to quote from the Bible, Proverbs 14:23, all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk only leads to poverty. Meaning you can talk the talk or you can walk the walk. So I'm going to invite Frank and Mike back on to talk about this weekend's workshop, which is going to be Friday night, Saturday, Sunday morning. And do we have a link for that? Do you have a slide with a link for that, Frank? Let me stop sharing.
I believe there is. Yeah.
But if you go to wealthbuilders.org/events, you will find it there. There it is. Possess the land. There he goes. We're all going to be one of the speakers there, as well as Frank and Billy and Becky and many more, and Karen and Mike, of course.
Yeah.
And what's great about it is I love Saturday morning. It's my favorite part. Speed coaching.
Yeah.
Speed coaching, right? So we do from 8 to 9 on Saturday morning. All of the speakers who are your coaches for the weekend are going to be answering questions, and we give you a few minutes with each one and then go to the next one, right? Give you speed coaching, give you advice on what to do, where to go, how to proceed. There's just so much. There's so many sessions, so much information. It's like the fire hose, the proverbial fire hose being opened on you. And you're going to get a tremendous amount of base of knowledge, as well as, nuggets, if you're more experienced, that will take you to the next level. And one of the topics I'll be talking about, of course, is this one, creative financing.
Yeah. You know, whether you don't know a lot about real estate or you think you know it all, you will find value in all of these workshops. I promise you.
Yes.
I learned something at each one of these. So I'm just telling you, I know Bill and Mike do too. Hey, Mike, any comments real quick? And we'll talk about coaching, and then we're going to have Bill answer a few questions. So if you got questions, go ahead and post them in the chat area, please.
I thought that was great. And I don't know if Bill's going to be teaching on the IRA, how to buy properties out. Are you teaching that as well, Bill?
Yeah.
I believe.
So will be.
Okay. So I tell you what, was that, you don't have to be Jewish to come up with a deal like you did. No.
But it helps.
Yes, it does. But I thought 777,000, 2.4 million. You don't even have to be good in math to know that's a great deal. So Bill's going to be talking about that this weekend, so you don't want to miss that. So absolutely fantastic, Bill. Good deal.
Thank you.
Mike, what are you going to be talking about?
Building a team is one of the subjects I'm going to be talking about. How about you, Frank?
We'll be talking about tax saving strategies for investors. We'll be talking about stages of a rehab, what to look for, and also just how to evaluate a multifamily property. Just a quick down and dirty. Well, hey, let's go ahead and get some questions in because we only got about 10 minutes. So, crew, if you guys see a question I'm missing, then please holler at me. Is it smart to buy solar panels as an investment? Bill?
Generally, no. They're not really going to improve the value of the property in relation to what you paid for them. With the exception of, if you're in a, sort of hippy dippy, environmentally savvy neighborhood like Austin, Texas, or Boulder, Colorado, or Eugene, Oregon, or whatever. The people are very, very, savvy and very hot on that. The reality is solar panels don't really save you much money now. Down the road, in theory, they do, because you're fixed at what you're paying every month. So as the utility companies continue to jack our rates, you're staying fixed. But I wouldn't drop 30 grand on them because thinking you're going to get 30 or 40 or 50 in value on the property. You won't, because frankly, they're not very attractive looking. You're stuck in a contract forever with those things. I would rather see you spend that 30 grand in the kitchen, updating the kitchen or the bathrooms.
Yeah, and efficient appliances and things like that, energy efficient. So cool. Okay, Fran, thank you for asking this. Logistics of a normal sale page appears that of a wholesale deal. It's very similar. Yes. I'm not sure I get that.
No. What I was showing was, in a normal sale, the seller is going to get all cash because the buyer is bringing in either his own cash or borrowing that from a third-party lender. But a cash sale means the seller gets all cash.
All right. Hey, those of you that are coaching students know that you have lifetime access to WealthBuilders University and also Bill's site, legalwiz.com. There are several full courses on lease options, creative financing, wholesaling properties, and those are updated with some frequency, aren't they, Bill?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
I'm constantly,
so
I'm constantly updating, especially the forms. I link them to my Dropbox on my computer, so when I update a form, I just drop it right in there.
That's right. That's right. All right. Anybody else? We got time for a couple more questions. Well, as Bill says, if you got to ask him off hours, then it's $4.75 an hour.
Right. Oh, it's free this weekend.
It is free this weekend.
This weekend, get lots of great advice from a lot of people. I mean, there's combined couple of 100 years experience between all of us who are teaching at that workshop and doing the speed coaching. So, it's for a lot of reasons you should go. If you absolutely cannot do live, you could do, of course, the online thing, but it's almost better to be there live than go online because
Yeah.
it's the relationships you build,
Yes.
the networking, what
Yes.
happens in breaks and people you talk to, and afterwards, before people having a coffee or a cocktail in the evening and spilling their guts about all the deals they've done, and plus just you know, there's that thing. There's that thing in the room. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Somebody asked my website is Legal Whiz or Whiz. It's WIZ. Legal WIZ, as in wizard, not whiz.
Yeah. And then also a question. We got time for a couple more questions here. One was about how do you invest in homes with your Roth IRA?
Yeah. So the quick down and dirty is an IRA can buy anything that you can buy with only two exceptions. The only thing you can't buy with an IRA are collectibles like comic books or rare coins or paintings or things like that, or life insurance policies. The only two things you can't buy. But most people think you can only buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and et cetera. And that's not true. It's just that big outfits like Fidelity and Schwab, they're commodities brokers, they're stock brokers. They don't deal in real estate. They're not real estate agents. So if you buy real estate with your IRA, they don't get a commission. That's why they don't offer it. So you have to set yourself up with a different type of custodian, a boutique custodian, which I'll talk about this weekend, where you have the ability to invest in things like real estate and many other things in your IRA.
All right. And the final question, and then gang, I'm going to have you pull up the coaching slide. We'll have Pastor Mike close us with a prayer. It says, is there a way to benefit from purchasing land without housing present?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's such a broad topic, but one example would be to buy property, and people are doing that and putting tiny homes on them and then renting them as vacation rentals. Another way would be to buy land and subdivide it and sell it to a developer. There's so many ways to make money on land.
Yeah. All right. We'll take one more. 5% down payment means having to pay PMI.
No, because the seller is the lender.
Yeah.
There's no PMI requirement when the seller is the lender.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit. You're going to hear a little bit more about the Wealth Builders coaching program. We have a curriculum where we have calls every first and third Tuesday of the month. You get a personal staging session with Karen. We do quick starts with one-day sessions with coaches. The next one will be November 16th. You get lifetime access to Wealth Builders University and also to legalwiz.com. Email support and Zoom support from from us, your coaches. You get a free consultation with Bill Bronchick, and of course those online teachings. Bill's gonna just tell you kind of, is your setup right or is it not? And if you don't have a setup, what should you do and that sort of thing. You get the strategic real estate investing book, and you get free Wealth Builder conferences and workshops for two people for life. So if you're interested, you can scan that code, or maybe we'll have a link here. It is $14,000. We offer a free consultation call, but we want people to realize the cost of the course. So anyway, with that, Bill, thank you so much. I always enjoy listening to you, and gosh, we're going to be enjoy listening to you this weekend. So Pastor Mike, any final words, and then you can pray us out.
We're looking forward to seeing everybody this coming weekend. It's going to be, like Bill said, it's going to be like a fire hose, but I tell you what, just getting our hearts knit together is worth it. And that one-on-one we're going to have on Saturday morning, it's so valuable. So with that, let's go ahead and pray.
You got it.
Father, we just thank you for the wisdom, for the leading and guiding of the Holy Spirit, Lord, that he leads us and he guides us. But Father, you've also said in your word that we need to put our hand to something. So I thank you for just there to be a stir within each and every one of us to put our hand to something, because that's when prosperity and the power to prosper can flow out of us. And so we thank you that it's your will for your children to prosper and be in health. So we thank you for your many blessings. They are yes and amen. And so we're thankful, God, for the Wealth Builders team and the family that you've put us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
And
Amen.
Hey, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Wealth Builders team. Mike, thank you. And hey, hopefully we'll see you this weekend. All
Yes.
right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.